2 left. We can do it. Oh boy. All right, we're gonna do mid-tier infantry, and we'll end with elite infantry. Mid-tier infantry. If you haven't watched this series before at all, here's your quick introduction. We are taking every mid-tier infantry in the entire game, putting them in one big tier list to determine who is the best mid-tier infantry of them all. We will not be considering campaign lord effects, campaign faction effects, or campaign technology effects. We will be factoring in their price point when I talk about a lot of things. Now, gold is not the only thing that matters about them, but it is something that matters. I expect more out of a unit that is 900 gold than a unit that is 600 gold. And it's about whether or not you overperform or underperform what I expect of you. Now, what is a mid-tier infantry? Mid-tier infantry doesn't have any definition within the infantry itself. Like, you could do a list of like chaff versus berserkers versus defenders versus elite duelists, and that's just too complicated for me. So I took every faction and I took their bottom couple infantry, their middle couple infantry, and their top couple infantry. In the light infantry section, right, we had dwarf warriors, which you might be like, those aren't light infantry, they're heavy infantry. Yeah, but I don't think of just armor as the only stat that matters, right? So then it's like, okay, well, what matters? Is it armor? Is it melee attack? Is it leadership? Is it cost? What matters? So I just took every faction. I did their worst infantry, their middle infantry, and their best. So this is all like the kind of mid infantries of the world. And let's get into it. Plague monks. I still think plague monks are A tier. I haven't gotten to use them as much recently because Skaven don't usually have a need to kill other infantry in melee. They have poisoned globes and doom flayers that now do a ton of damage to infantry. Jezzails can shoot them at a far range. You can just kite them out. Ikit Claw and his brass orb and his doom wheel can kill a bunch of them. But when you need to kill infantry in melee, plague monks are a great way to do it. They are undervalued. They have actually pretty high stats as long as they have their strength in numbers passive, which gives them more melee defense, which is quite nice. They have a good bonus versus infantry, high weapon strength, and they are only 650 gold. Plague monks are actually quite solid. You just don't see them often because Skaven don't often need to kill light infantry. Death runners, on the other hand, a little more niche, a little more elite. 850 gold, still have some physical resistance, still have stock. Bonus versus infantry and armor piercing and armor sundering can make death runners a decent support unit, which is odd because if in the late game you have heavy cavalry to deal with, the death runners can, one death runner that's already almost dead can still just apply the weeping blade, and then your clan rats with spears and Skaven slaves with spears can drag down heavy cavalry because that death runner applied that little poison. Other than that, they are niche, so they're a specialist with support utility, which is weird. But yeah, they can kill heavy infantry very quickly, and after that, they're just kind of a little debuff monster. But they're super squishy, and relatively high price point keeps them out of the S and A tier area. Saurus warriors. I believe this is shielded, spear, club, whatever. All Saurus warriors are going to go in A tier. You don't see them much in multiplayer yet again, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Similar to the plague monks, the online meta is not infantry heavy right now, and that might be changing with the patch, but so far I haven't seen infantry really being the breadwinners. So plague monks being anti-infantry mid-tier infantry in a meta where infantry is currently getting run over by giant monsters and cavalry, they don't have much of a place. And Saurus are kind of similar. In campaign, Saurus are much better because there's a lot more slap drag out infantry fights, which they excel at. Saurus for 800 gold have a lot of raw stats. They're a health pool, they're high melee defense and melee attack that can churn through light infantry for days. The problem online, why you don't see many Saurus and why multiplayer players might be weirded out to see them in A, there's not that much to defend, and Saurus would be great at defending stuff, but like Salamander hunting packs don't do that much damage versus other players who are just going to ignore your Saurus and get around you and penetrate your backline. AI are a little easier to hit with Salamanders. AI are a little easier to hit with Razordawn hunting packs. AI are a little easier to hit with Engine of the Gods, where the giant sunbeam comes down the side and all you need Saurus to do is just stand still and hold them there. That stuff doesn't work as well against players, so there's really not that much reason to hold a single point as much, and that's what Saurus do. Maybe they're a little better in domination, though I haven't heard any domination players exactly singing Saurus's praises. So, Saurus are actually very good, just not that good in multiplayer. But I don't just think about multiplayer, despite all the criticisms. I do factor in campaign. White Lions of Krace. Gonna go in B. 800 gold, decent-ish armor, a little bit of missile resist from their Lion's Pelt, good armor piercing, good melee stats. They're just a little slow. They are unshielded, and they don't kill things super quickly. So that's putting them in B tier. They have as many positives as they have negatives. I feel neutral about them. White Lions of Krace are fine. Good at dealing with heavily armored front lines if you know those are coming. Bad if the enemy does not have armor. If they just have chaff infantry, your White Lions are way too expensive to cut through chaff all day. Witch Elves, going straight into our S tier category. Not cheap at 750 gold, but really good berserker type infantry that just runs straight up to light infantry, or honestly even heavy infantry. If they pop their Witch's Brew buff, that one-time buff they use to just go into a frenzy, they massacre anything they're in contact with. They are fantastic at murdering front lines. A lot of people that fight Dark Elves have taken strategies now to either hit heavy cav or chariots against the enemy front line just to knock Witch Elves out of formation or do a lot of damage to them before they hit the front line, because if Witch Elves get to your front line at full HP and then pop the Witch's Brew, whatever you have is gone. Even if it has armor, these guys just slap through it. So Witch Elves are pretty strong right now. Very, very powerful. There are some counters to them, but I think they have enough positives at enough a decent enough price point that I'm going to put them in S tier. Blackheart Corsairs, mostly overshadowed by Witch Elves. I am going to put Blackheart Corsairs in A tier. 650 gold, high armor, which is hard to come by at that price point. So 650 gold, high armor, anti-infantry, good melee stats. They're just overshadowed by the faster and more damaging Witch Elves for just a little bit more gold. But I think on other rosters, Blackheart Corsairs would do pretty well. Again, this unit is suffering from it being not an infantry meta, so their anti-infantry stats are a little wasted, but I don't think that makes them a bad unit. It just makes them not have a huge place right now, which seems a little counterintuitive, but again, thinking about campaign, Blackheart Corsairs in the early game are quite nice to churn through infantry, because in campaign, there's going to be infantry to kill. Rangers. B. Now that picture looks a little weird. I've mentioned it in other videos. I have the content creator asset kit where I got all these portraits from. So these are apparently the old Rangers. I don't know why they didn't update them, but it is what it is. Rangers are B tier. They just got some more buffs. 600 gold compared to the 650 Blackheart Corsairs. They are just the Blackheart Corsairs, except you're paying 50 gold for a ton more armor on the Corsairs than the Rangers, and other than that, they're pretty comparable. So the Blackheart Corsairs are just a bit better. Rangers are still solid. Anti-infantry, infantry killers, low armor, a little bit of physical resistance to keep them healthy, and then high elf stats as long as their HP is high. Eshin Triads. I'm going to put you in C tier. The anti-large variant of Death Runners, pretty much. Eshin Triads just run into issues with... they are countered by the large units they are meant to fight. In that, so many monsters now have collision attacks that they go straight through the Eshin Triads and either just break their own way out of them. Like, even if you screw up and put a giant monster in the middle of Eshin Triads, it can just walk out of them like nobody's business, so it's fine. It didn't take any damage. If it gets a good charge attack on them with the collision attacks, it'll usually do so much damage it routs them because they're still cowardly Skaven. And if Heavy Cav catches them not braced, then it kills them on the charge. Now, you might be like, well, human boy, they're stealthed and they have charge defense. So what you do is you put them in front of a heavy cav, stealthed, and then when you unstealth, the heavy cav see you too late and they charge straight into you and you get charge reflection. And I say, dear viewer, to get charge reflection, I had to charge you. And if I didn't know you were there, I probably had movement orders past you or attack orders on something behind you. And therefore, I would not be charging you. You don't get the charge reflection. It's the only way that they get to be a halberd unit is if your opponent sees them and decides to charge them while they're braced, which is just your opponent making a mistake. Unlike the Death Runners, who are B tier, the Death Runners are meant to kill heavy infantry and then their armor sundering is useful later in the game. Eshin Triads are meant to kill large units, which large units also just murder the Eshin Triads. So I put them in C. Because Death Runners are actually good at killing what they're meant to kill. Heavy infantry. They murder it. Eshin Triads are terrible at killing large units. Red Crested Skinks all the way back up in A tier. 525 gold for spread formation, armor piercing, frenzied skinks. I'm honestly tempted to put them in S tier, and I just might. They have poison damage as well. Yep, that is an S tier light infantry. Never mind. Red Crest Skinks, S tier, baby! Oh, a lot to love about these guys. Low-ish leadership, squishy-ish due to low armor and low mass. Those are the only downsides, but for a cheap price point, this is some of the cheapest armor piercing you can get in the entire game, and the poison is very nice as well. Red Crested Skinks are very fast, spread formation, so they're not super susceptible to Burning Head until they get fully locked into the melee. Syrenes, also going to go in C tier. A lot of ghost units are having a bad time, both as Warhammer 3 gets increasing amounts of magic damage all around the place to deal with demons. The ghost units are just kind of catching strays on that one. So a 0 armor unit relying on 55% physical resistance in a game with ever more magic damage to bypass the physical resistance, it's a bad time. Syrenes also just don't do enough damage quickly enough to be a true berserker unit. The only real positive they have is armor piercing from being a ghost, I guess. That's true. But they have terror as well. That is quite nice. That makes me debate putting them in B tier, is just having terror on a relatively cheap unit, 800 gold. But it's relatively cheap to have terror on an 800 gold unit. The unit itself is not cheap. And like, this thing can get deleted by one burning head easily. So 800 gold is a lot to put into a ghost unit for the Syrenes for not enough reward. Nakar Warriors, also going to go in C tier. Next to the Syrenes. Significantly cheaper, but they're just kind of like Rangers and Black Ark Corsairs, but even worse. It's just a sliding scale where it's like, oh man, Black Ark Corsairs are really good dual weapon infantry. Cool. Okay, Rangers are still okay, but not great. Oh, and Nakar Warriors are kind of bad. Not high stats, not high armor piercing, just bonus versus infantry and okay melee stats. Unshielded, unarmored, susceptible to archers and cavalry, and not even that great at killing infantry. They're kind of okay. Tomb King's infantry in general is not very good. Crypt Ghouls. D. They've gotten buffs recently. I didn't feel them. They feel terrible. They feel so awful. They're one of those units, as I say every video, but I need to say it at least once, otherwise you don't know what I'm talking about, where their stat page just doesn't seem to match their in-game performance. Like the stat page, you go, oh, okay, this looks all right. This unit does some damage. And then you send it into the game and it does nothing and dies immediately and doesn't kill anything. And you're like, what happened to you? Why are you already dead? So I don't know. Crypt Ghouls just underperform all the time and I really despise them. They've failed me for the last time. Force choke. Next up is Hexwraiths. The only ghost unit that has made it out of C or D tier for me so far, I think, in all of these tier lists. Hexwraiths got my begrudging respect against some specific matchups, so I now start to view them as a specialist rather than just a bad unit. There are a couple situations that you can get Hexwraiths in that are very strong, like versus armored single entities or armored monstrous infantry. They're kind of like halberds without anti-large. And they're very good at killing other elite infantry, like heavy infantry that will be in a different list. Anything with a ton of armor, Hexwraiths will trade up into it. Now, they are still very, very squishy, with their physical resistance not being as important as we mentioned with the Syrenes. But I feel like the Hexwraiths just provide that little bit more oomph that the Syrenes don't have. Hexwraiths do actually do some solid damage. And then, of course, they're a ghost. They still have terror, which is quite nice. Savage Orcs! A tier. Savage Orcs are quite good for 550 gold. They get some physical resistance, they get frenzy, they have very little armor, but decently high leadership for a greenskin unit, and with Wa getting popped every so often, these guys get a big bump up in damage, and they're going to absolutely pump the jams, pump the jams. And then, yeah, that's about it. Anti-infantry, infantry killer. Savage Orc Biggins are going to go in S tier. Savage Orc Biggins, like their Savage Orc brothers, do not have high armor, but they do have anti-large and really good weapon strength, really good melee attack, and they're still good at killing infantry. So Savage Orc Biggins kind of kill whatever you throw them at. And with their high mass, cavalry has a hard time cycle charging them, because if you charge in, you get some decent damage on the charge, but then the Savage Orcs that you haven't killed yet just start slapping the crap out of you. And unless you're perfectly on top of it with your micro, you get kind of stuck in there. And even then, their high mass makes some cavalry units get stuck and fall behind, and then those get torn to pieces. Savage Orc Biggins are very, very solid. Again, online, the infantry has not been having a great time in the meta in general, but comparing Savage Orc Biggins to other infantry, They are S tier. Would I say they're S tier in the overall meta? No, but all of these units are having a bad time in the meta, so comparing them to each other, Savage Orc Biggins are doing very well, right? Yeah. Orc Boys. Orc Boys are going to be C. Orc Boys are tanky, and they do damage, but that's about it. They're not good armored. I think they only have bronze shields. They have a good health pool, but they don't do a lot of damage very quickly. There's just better options than the Orc Boys. They're not abysmal. They're almost B. I would put them at almost B, but for a mid-tier infantry, they're pretty whatever. Goblins are usually better at what they're doing, and goblins are in the light infantry list. So, maybe you could argue I should have put these guys in the light infantry list, but when there's goblin swords and spears, night goblins, and then nasty skulkers. Actually, nasty skulkers might be in this list. It's hard to put the Orc Boys all the way down there, but either way, I think they're just kind of a C tier unit. They're okay. Orc Biggins back into A. Orc Biggins are very tanky, do good damage, have a little more armor than their Savage Orc compatriots do. Still solid leadership, still high weapon strength, so a lot to love about these guys. And again, kind of like Savage Orc Biggins, they can still kill infantry too. Just because they have anti-large doesn't mean they're like a true halberd unit that can't handle infantry very well. So Orc Biggins will always do good work for you. Not as great at busting through a front line as Savage Orcs are, but they're way better against like cavalry and stuff. Halberdiers of the Empire also going to go into A tier. For 550 gold, that is a very cheap price point for the high melee defense, high armor piercing, high bonus versus large that Halberdiers have. Unshielded and low armor, they are a little weak to spells and or ranged units, but other than that, they do a great job as either a defensive frontline against other infantry or a defensive offensive option versus large targets. Slayers. Slayers are going to go in S tier. Slayers are relatively fast, shielded, non-armored infantry, but their bonus versus large and weapon strength in general is quite incredible. They have good spell resistance, very high melee stats, and they're unbreakable. They even have death blow. When they die, they swing one last time. Slayers are incredible. A lot of factions would love to have that option in their roster, but only the dwarves truly get them. Followed up with Longbeards. Longbeards are going to go in A tier. Immune to psychology, and I believe they also offer encourage. I believe that is true. So they keep other units near them a little topped off on leadership. Longbeards are nearly unbreakable. Incredibly high melee defense, all of the defensive stats you could want, but there's two big things that keep them out of S tier. Their personal damage potential is abysmal, and their speed is awful. So they can't really move into any engagement that you need them to. They kind of have to already be where you want them to be. And then they're not going to kill anything. They're just never going to break. So they're very solid, but limited in their scope, which does make them A tier. Chaos Warriors, halberds or otherwise, I'm going to put in B tier. For a higher price point than the Longbeards, they are less tanky, less good at holding positions, and they honestly don't do that much more damage. They do a bit more damage than Longbeards, but not that much. Chaos Warrior frontlines haven't gotten a lot done in a long time, and the only thing dragging them up to B tier is honestly the halberd variant. Basic Chaos Warriors would probably be C or D, but I kind of lump all those variants together to just keep this list relatively manageable. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because of the halberd variant and move them up to B. But Chaos Warriors in general have not been having a great time, even though infantry isn't doing well. Even compared to other infantry, they've been kind of left behind for what was theoretically supposed to be the cream of the crop. Chaos Warriors were kind of introduced to the game and to the lore as being the scariest of the scary infantry, and then time left them behind. Men-at-Arms, Polearms, gonna go in B for 420 gold, 425 gold. Decently cheap halberd, okay leadership, very high melee defense stats. They're just a slightly worse version of the halberdier, but still have enough armor piercing to make them solid for Bretonnian front lines. And yeah, they're good. I've even done some triple gold chevron and Grail Relique builds that make my make my halberds like nearly unbreakable chosen, and that's pretty funny. But yeah, they do solid. They do okay. Berserkers, also B tier. 750 gold for an anti-infantry infantry killer. Weak to spells and archers and cavalry. Berserkers can tear through a front line faster than anybody else, but they are one-track mind. They are here to kill infantry, and that is it. Anything else will body these fools. So their extreme proficiency at doing one thing gets them all the way to B, but no higher. Battle Pilgrims back down to D tier. Sorry, Battle Pilgrims. I used to be a fan. I used to like Battle Pilgrims, and then they sucked for a long time. 600 gold, bronze shield, not that high of damage, not that high of defensive stats, just kind of lost in the sauce. It's a unit that has no home, no function. They're not great. They just need some help. Nasty Skulkers also going down to D tier. I don't know what their deal is. You look at their... They have this ability where, like, for a little bit, they get plus melee attack, and then they have really high armor piercing, and you think that'll be good. And I've even tried giving them, like, sneaky stabbing from the Night Goblin Shaman lore of Magic, Little Wah. Something's not right with these guys, man. They just, like, don't get the damage out. No matter how much melee attack I give them, no matter how much weapon strength I give them, they just don't kill things very fast. And I wonder if there's some animation issues or something. I can't put my finger on it, but Nasty Skulkers, every time I've tried to invest in them or try and do something cheeky with them, they just suck and die. I can't make them any good outside of, like, Skarsnik's campaign. War Dancers, B. War Dancers are solid. Low armor, unshielded, take a lot of damage from archers, all that crap. Take a lot of damage from cavalry as well. But they can use their various stances to be either more tanky or more damage dealing, and that flexibility is nice. I also know they've been doing really well in domination for, like, spawning and sprinting to points and then clearing out the infantry that are trying to hold that point. So factoring in how good they are in domination does bump them up to B tier a little bit. But similar to they're just a Wood Elf Berserker, like, great at killing other infantry and end of list. That's about it. Still solid and not that expensive. Flagellants, D tier. Unbreakable, but for 600 gold with crazy low stats in every department besides leadership, Flagellants are abysmal. Their damage output is incredibly limited. They are weak to spells. They are weak to other infantry. They are weak to cavalry. They are weak to archers. They're weak to everything. Flagellants are terrible. They have a little niche gimmick passive that they sometimes get to give them more melee defense, but it's incredibly limited in its use, and it's bad. They're bad. Gore Herds, even with your buffs, I'm putting you in C tier. Gore Herds have Vanguard, and they do okay damage, and they're not that tanky. Still pretty low leadership, and for like 550 or 600 gold, depending on your variant, it's just a lot of money to be spending on something that does okay. And it only does okay against other light infantry, which is usually cheaper than it. Because it has no good armor piercing. It has no anti-large, so yeah. Poo-poo you, Gore Herd. Forsaken. Actually, S tier. I've been using Forsaken a lot recently. Forsaken are crushing it after the several buffs they've gotten. And then Slanesh Forsaken just got a buff in this last patch. So now all Forsaken variants are doing very well. High armor, insane weapon strength, and then Frenzy gives them high melee attack. High speed as well. The only things Forsaken are really suffering from is low melee defense, so they take a lot of damage while they deal a lot of damage, but man, these are great fire and forget units. Just chuck them at the enemy front line, give them attack orders on something, and let them rip everything in front of you to shreds. They're great. Forsaken are amazing. Next up is Chameleon Stalkers. That is another D tier unit, unfortunately. What to say about you? Pretty high price point for a middling or bad melee infantry. And their little fire grenades can do okay damage, but there's a lot of times they do almost no damage at all. Or these guys just don't throw them for some reason. Because you can't target them like a normal missile attack. You have to be like running into melee, and then their AI, the AI that controls your Chameleon Stalkers, decides whether or not to actually throw its freaking grenades. So it's really annoying to try and get those grenades out. And even when you finally get one to hit, it does okay damage. Chameleon Stalkers just don't do very much for their price point. They're quite bad. Basic Demonettes are going to go in C tier. Crazy blitzing infantry with high armor piercing values. Like the Seekers in the light cavalry list, they trade up pretty well. Demonettes will fight more elite units than themselves well, but they trade down poorly. If they're fighting anybody else that actually does damage back to them, that's like a light infantry, they're going to take a lot of damage. And then cavalry and archers can do a lot of damage to them because they're unshielded and have low armor. Demonettes just have a bad time. They are niche, but they're not as good at their niche as berserkers or war dancers are. So Demonettes a little too costly, and being demonic makes sure that they just instantly crumble whenever anything looks at them wrong. 800 gold is a lot to lose for that. Plague Bearers are going to go in C tier. I thought about D, but Plague Bearers are only good at one thing, and that is slowly grinding other infantry into the dirt. They don't do much damage versus large targets. They don't do much damage versus archers because usually archers can outrun them, and that's the big thing, is they're crazy slow. But if for some reason your opponent opts into a melee fight with them, if for some reason your opponent doesn't just shoot them with archers, Plague Bearers will do well in that melee fight, but that feels like a lot to ask for that to work out. Do I have all Forsaken variants, or did I forget just to delete this one? Because I usually like to lump those guys together. Yeah, it looks like I just have this extra one, so I'm going to get rid of this Forsaken of Nurgle. Armored Kossars are going to be A tier. 700 gold, they're honestly still worth that with their pistol shot, high armor, shielded, pretty high leadership, good melee stats, and Buyer Blood passive, making them unbreakable for a little bit. The only thing that keeps them out of S is their relatively limited melee stats. Just like they don't have armor piercing or anti-large or anything like that to get them higher, and they are still a little spency for the price. But having some pistols is nice. Armor Kossars, welcome to A tier. Next up, Chaos Warriors of Khorne, skip you, because all Chaos Warriors got kind of lumped together there. Bloodletters, also C. Everything I said about the Demonettes applies to the Bloodletters as well. Bloodletters are slightly less damaging, slightly less squishy Demonettes, but they're still very squishy. They still do high damage, but they're weak to so many things, and being demonic at 800 gold just makes them take one bad cavalry charge and they get knocked out of the game entirely. They'll just demonic instability crumble to death. So it's pretty brutal out here for a poor little Bloodletter. Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Halberds. I actually do have differing opinions of you, so I'll keep your variants. Jade Warrior Halberds are going to be C. I've played a lot of Grand Cathay after the patch, and I played against a lot of Grand Cathay. Jade Warrior Halberds feel not very good. They're slow. They don't do a lot of damage. They're not that tanky because they don't have enough armor to be crazy tanky. They're still like weak to basic archers and stuff. And they're so slow about dealing damage that they're just not great. And being unshielded is really brutal. Their Jade Warrior cousins, however, I'll put in B tier. These guys used to be Omega triple S tier, but they've taken nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf, patch over patch, and now they're down to just being B tier. 550 gold for a high armor, high melee defense unit that, especially if it's buffed up by Harmony, can just hold forever and be pretty crazy tanky and hard to get through. But unlike their Jade Warrior Halberd variant, they're shielded, which makes them good and tanky against archers, and a little better on that front. But yeah, I feel like the Halberds just die quicker to everything than the Jade Warriors, and they don't do that much damage to make up for it. Pestigors, Thrones of Decays. Maybe, not the best unit, but best unit for Nurgle from Thrones of Decay for a while. Pestigors have taken some nerfs since then. Still A tier, still very strong. A great axe spread formation infantry with a lot of HP and damage potential, and if anything routes near them, everything else near them takes a 75% speed debuff and loses some vigor, making it easier for the Pestigors to continue murdering fools. Pestigors are quite strong. They're really good against cavalry because of their spread formation, high mass, and high HP with their armor piercing. If a cavalry charges them, it'll get through the first few rows nicely, and then it'll slow down and get bogged down as these poison armor-piercing goats just beat the crap out of them and cut their horses out from beneath their saddles. Pestigors are quite good. Quite good. They have taken some nerfs, though. Keeps them out of S tier. Slayer Pirates. I'm going to put you in C, maybe D. Slayer Pirates are squishier, less good in melee combat Slayers that have a couple pistol shots that do almost no damage, and they're low range. I don't know. I just generally don't feel Slayer Pirates are very good. I saw them right when the DLC came out, and since then I haven't seen much of them, and every time I try and use them to make a funny video, they suck and die. They are bad. They're not as bad as the D tier, but they're still bad. Zongors. I'll put you in A. Zongors are okay. Zongors are magic damage, shielded, and barriered. Medium infantry. Decently good at holding, decently good at killing, vanguard deployment, relatively fast, and they get more damage the more spells that are cast near them, up to a cap of like 20%. So they're pretty solid. And they recently got some more buffs. So good for you, Zongors. You're not crazy impressive, but you are fine. Chaos Dwarf Warriors, on the other hand, gonna go in B. Recently got some buffs that have made them feel rather good, but they are still quite expensive, which makes me not put them much higher than B. But they went from being C or D tier to B with these health buffs, so definitely needed the buffs. Chaos Dwarf Warriors will hold forever. They are somewhat better than Dwarf Warriors at getting aggressive, but they are also 200 gold more expensive. They're fine. Their Great Weapon variant I tend to find is actually worse than their Shield variant, because the Great Weapons lose a lot of tankiness, and you pay more money for them, just for a bit of armor piercing, which is... They generally don't have the stats to really apply the armor piercing that well, so you might as well keep them nice and tanky. Which, if you keep them nice and tanky, they're an inevitable rock that'll just slowly grind through any front line. Hobgoblin Cutthroats, these are not the ones that throw the little shurikens. These are the 400 gold ones, and they are D tier. They did not get any buffs in the Chaos Dwarf Massive Buff patch, and I think that is felt. They are very terrible. Incredibly easy to rout and murder, low leadership, low damage, no reason to take them, unfortunately. Hobgoblin Cutthroats are garbage. Garbage, garbage, garbage. How many do we got left? Okay. Piggyback Riders, gonna still go in S tier even after their nerfs. Piggyback Riders are quite good. They are spearmen that cannot be knocked over, which means when cavalry charge into them, they take a little bit of damage, but they just swing at them immediately. And cavalry rely on knocking over infantry to be able to turn around and get out of there before damage starts coming back in. Piggyback Riders have pretty high stats as long as their leadership and HP are high. Though they are still Noblars, they're very cowardly and will rout whenever they take too much damage. They're still just solid. And for only 400 gold, they might be the cheapest thing on this list. I think they are. Ooh, Hobgoblin Cutthroats are also pretty cheap. But yeah, they're almost the cheapest thing on this list for how strong they are. It's quite solid. They definitely deserve S tier. The Ogres would be lost without their Piggyback Riders. Skull Reapers, C tier. Not terrible, not good. Great at killing any infantry in their path, even armored infantry. Skull Reapers can generally just do good work on. Their problem comes from other anti-infantry infantry trade back into them quite well. While the Skull Reapers will kill them, they will also kill a lot of Skull Reapers. Like Bloodletters versus Skull Reapers is almost an even trade, and that's not great when you're 300 gold more expensive. And their relatively low armor makes them weak to archers. Cavalry can cycle charge them nicely. So they're just a little too expensive for how squishy they are, and it is a problem to keep them alive for Khorne. Especially when Khorne specifically has tons of ways to kill infantry that isn't Skull Reapers. Like, it's not like, oh man, but Khorne has to take them. You gotta do it. It's like, no, Khorne can function without you. They have Bloodletters, they have Chosen, they have Wrathmongers, which are actually crazy strong. Honestly, Bloodbeats, Chariots, Scarbrand himself, Sword of Khorne, Valkia's Spear Sleipnir. Like, Khorne is great at killing infantry, doesn't need you. And finally, Khorngors are going to go solidly in B tier after they've taken some nerfs. I do think they're kind of on the lower end of the Beastmen DLC infantry. As we can see, I mean, Pestigors and Zongors are above them. They're just getting a little too niche to be higher. Now, B is fine. B is not bad, but they're only good now against large monsters or monstrous infantry, somewhat cavalry. They're pretty terrible against other infantry. They're terrible at getting through a front line. They're relatively expensive, and they're pretty squishy when it comes down to it. And after their Unbreakable passive wears off from getting to 50% HP, then they're pretty easy to push off the battlefield after that point. So Khorngors are a cheap-ish halberd option for Khorne that does their job, and not much more than that. Here's your medium infantry tier list. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got some good chuckles. Like and subscribe if you want to. If you want to support the channel, we desperately need subscribers. We are begging, pleading. Our hat is in our hand, and we have 3 quarters in there. 3 quarters can't buy much these days, so please subscribe if you like this kind of content, or multiplayer replays, or various tip videos, or any of that stuff. And if you don't like it, then you spent an awfully long time staying here to not like it. All right, bye. Roar.
subscribe. Yes, yes.